Thank you very much for coming to watch tonight's webinar. My name is Lisa Klein, and I am with Gwinnett County Extension, UGA Extension Gwinnett, however you'd like to say it, in on the Agriculture and Natural Resources team. And I have the series called In the Garden, which is a series of webinars, usually a couple of them per month in the evening, and then one lunch and learn on a Tuesday. So we have our evening webinars on Thursdays, and we have our lunch and learns on Tuesdays, and have all sorts of stuff. In this case, we're following in the series of the Georgia Green Landscape or Georgia Green Landscape Stewards, which is an awesome program that was started quite a few years ago by Jessica Warren down in Camden County. And it has a series of different metrics that you can rank yourself against in your yard. And if you get the score, then you can qualify yourself to have the awesome little sign. Let's see if I can show it here. I don't know. The Zoom doesn't like it. There we go. You can kind of see it here. I have one. Um, Basically, it's the same sign that you see right there on your screen. It's probably about 9 inches tall by probably about 6 inches wide. And it is a wonderful little sign, and you can put that up in your yard. There is an extra cost for that, but it is a very sturdy, nice metal sign. And I can speak highly for that. So, as part of the program, and how do you get that sign? Well, you can watch these series, and there's quite a few of them, like 11, 12, 13, something like that, different presentations on a variety of subjects. And they're meant to educate you so that you, as a homeowner or property owner, can know more about the environment and make better choices. Most of us who are here probably already make most of these choices. And so I wouldn't be too surprised if after watching this, you headed on over to the website, and I'll provide the link for that. Or you can simply just search it and took that little test. It's an online test, and boom, you qualify. So technically, you're supposed to watch all of the videos or be present and have someone present them to you. But yeah, I mean, of course, I would love for you to listen to me, but I think if you are here, you're probably already in the know. So. Let's go ahead and get started. Tonight, we're going to be talking about native plants and low maintenance landscapes. I delve down a lot of rabbit holes, and I sometimes will get highly technical, and sometimes, like tonight, they're not as technical. So this is a different series that someone else had created, and it's very wonderful. It'll have a bunch of different native plant species that you can look at planting in your own yard. They're suitable for all over the state of Georgia in the southeast. So Camden County is down in South Georgia. Most of these species will be perfectly happy no matter where you are in Georgia. So let's go ahead and get started. So obviously, it's part of the Georgia Extension Service and Green Landscape, funded by the Center for Urban Agriculture, to help Georgia residents create sustainable landscapes. All right, what makes a landscape low maintenance? Well, some of us don't, we like looking at a lovely low maintenance landscape, and we don't like putting as much work into it. It can be kind of backbreaking. And honestly, when it's in July and August and it's really hot, a lot of us would rather be sitting inside where it's not as hot, right? Um, so I'm okay putting the effort into it on the front end to get it all established and get it happy. But I don't like spending a ton of time out there, what little time I have, constantly pulling weeds, um, pruning things, fertilizing stuff, watering things, doing all sorts of maintenance to try to make my landscape look good. I am a fan of finding plants that do well where they're supposed to be, right plant, right place. Because if they're going to do well in the situation that I put them in, once they're established, it takes very little care to keep them happy. So, a low maintenance landscape would be something where you're expending minimal labor. You're not having to put a lot of effort into whatever it is that you're doing. So, you're not planting sunny plants in the shade or shady plants in the sun. You're not planting plants that would be happier up north, down south, or southern plants up north. You're finding plants that will be quite happy where you're going to put them, right plant, right place. So some of those things would be, as I said, fertilizers, pesticides. You don't pick cultivars, plants that are not well adapted to the locale in which you're planting them. Maybe what you have is something that the bugs like to nibble on. I don't want to have to constantly go out there and apply neem oil or insecticidal soap or something else. I would prefer it if the bugs didn't like whatever that plant is. So you're going to seek out plants that are harmonious with nature, that don't have a lot of pest species. And we'll talk about some of those. Store-bought amendments and mulch. So, yeah, I do expound on the virtues of mulch. I like it because it just means you have to water less. It helps keep the soil moist and it'll help keep the weeds down. But if you have the right plants, you won't have to worry about the weeds so much. Um, and again, the plants that are going to thrive easily and those that you don't have to do much more other than babysit. Now, we're kind of in a moderate to severe drought. We've gotten some water recently. Some people were lucky and got a lot more water than others. I think I ended up with about 4 inches, maybe 4.5 inches, which is good. That pulled us out of the exceptional drought, but it's still dry. And we're in a dry spell right now. They're not talking about rain until maybe this weekend. So plants that don't need a lot of intervention are A plus. So how do you create a low maintenance landscape? So I've already kind of said it. You're going to plant native. You're going to plant either straight natives or nativars. That's what I call them. Well, a lot of people call them that. And what that is that means that it is a cultivar of a native. It may have some factor of it enhanced, such as the flower or the smell or disease resistance, things like that. So the nursery professionals have taken a native plant and enhanced it a bit. Um, Natural mulch and ground cover. So you can go get chip drop. That's a great place to start. They'll come and drop off a dump truck load of wood chips in your driveway, and you can use that free of charge to put all around the beds that you have. So can't beat that, right? Or you could choose a ground cover that does well in the sun and shade, whichever you're dealing with. You want to establish strong roots. So make sure that you're amending soil when you're first planting things. You want to have a nice, strong root system. You want to establish that plant well. So that means for that first year and a half, you're probably going to be doing some watering and babying it a bit because you want it to establish. And as I've mentioned before, the right plant, the right place. You got to have sun, the correct sun conditions, the correct soil moisture and drainage. You're not going to put rain garden plants in an upland area on a slope in the sun when it would be happier along a shady stream bank. Spacing, I know you think it looks good when you cram a bunch of things in together, it makes it look fuller faster, but heed what the label says and stick with the spacing that the plant needs, because when you start reducing airflow, you start increasing disease issues and you start increasing insect issues and all the bad things. So that plant will grow on its own and it will expand and fill the area as long as you follow along with whatever the label directions are. And heat tolerance. So don't pick things that don't do well down here in the South. We do get some transplants, and that's probably a big one for folks. I mean, I have a list of things. I've lived here and there. I've lived most of my life in the South, but I have at times lived up in Illinois, and it's a very temperate climate, very, you know, get jealous of the summers because it is very temperate. And, you can get a nice 60 degrees in the evening in July or August. It's great. But you can grow a lot of stuff up there that you can't grow down here. Lilacs, there's one. I'm trying to think of some of the things, but lilacs are a good one. A lot of people love how they smell. They are very beautiful bushes, tall trees, but they don't do well down here. There are some cultivars that will survive down here in the South, but they don't smell the same. So make sure that whatever you're selecting is going to be tolerant of the heat and the humidity that it can find down here. So planting natives, that's what this is about because they tend to do best. They have evolved in this ecosystem down here. They can tolerate the heat, they can tolerate the humidity. You have the pollinators, the butterflies, the bees, all the other things. You can, those are they've coexisted together. They have evolved together. And so when you plant natives, those will inherently do better than if you pluck something from, out west, which we don't have. I mean, obviously, yes, stuff gets moved around. And people who espouse natives will tell you don't plant anything but natives. It's okay to plant some that are things that aren't natives, but do make sure that you do have native plants there because that's what those pollinators need. Yeah, that is, the most important. And that's going to provide the nutrition that they need to do well. And just as so, some of you may not realize there are 100 distinct environments of plant communities in Georgia. I have other presentations that will go into much more detail about those types of communities. We're not going to talk about that here. If you're curious, you can always do a little research or you can reach out. I'm happy to share. But the plants that grow where they do, it's because they've adjusted to that local environment. So again, very site specific, right plant, right place. And you want to make sure that you continue that for your garden so that you're feeding the insects and the other pollinators, which include birds. And you want to make sure that they are happy and getting what they need. All right, so let's dive into the plant list because that's what y'all are looking for, right? So you can have the Eastern Blue Star, which again, most of these are going to come in nativars. This is just the straight up native Amsonia, and it's kind of a nondescript, quiet little blue flower. It's very compact, kind of clump forming, and it the leaves will kind of turn a yellowish gold in the fall. So you get some fall color out of it. It'll have these kind of nondescript blue flowers, which are very light blue, and it does prefer well-drained soil. It's okay in partial shade, but really it's going to be probably more like if you have a sunny backyard, morning sun, if you get that. Sometimes when we talk about the needs of plants here in the South, because the sunlight's so intense, if you've moved from somewhere up north or you've moved from somewhere like in the Northeast or up in, the northern tier states or even like Washington State, the sunlight here is much more intense. So it's if something that's full sun out there would probably be part sun here, and it would be sun in the morning, maybe not the afternoon, because afternoon sun is much hotter and more intense. So trying to educate folks that yes, it may say full sun on a label, but that's in a different part of the country if it will grow there as well. This one is okay with morning sun, so or into the afternoon, but and it'll tolerate a little more than other plants, but it does not want full sun. Or sorry, it doesn't want full shade. After you get that flush of flowers, you're going to cut that plant back. And that will encourage, and it's just, we do that with most of our plants, but that encourages it to get kind of bushy, not to grow too tall, but to bush out a little bit, to fill out the area. I know a lot of people, if you're from Peachtree Corners and some of the areas around there, are probably like, I see that the deer don't like it. Yes, we have a problem with deer in the metro area, lots of deer. I believe the population of white-tailed deer over in Peachtree Corners area is about 8 times higher than it should be. A lot of that is because there's no predation anymore. Really, cars are about it. People feed them. Don't feed deer, please, because you're increasing the carrying capacity. It's above already what it should be. We don't need any more. Okay, we just don't need any more. So, these guys are going to be about 2 to 3 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide in a clump. So, very nice. And if you get the little blue flowers there. So you're going to find these in nice, rich hardwood forest, floodplains, and along stream banks, sunny stream banks. The Eastern Columbine. So this is a plant that does well, versions of it do well in the Midwest and upper Midwest, and they have these really pretty flowers. So there's all sorts of different colors of columbine. These are kind of a richer red with yellow centers, and different than some of the Midwestern varieties. So if you're looking and you see these in a seed catalog and they're pretty pastel colors, it's probably not the same thing, and you may be saddened by the fact that they just aren't happy and coming up where you want them. But this plant has beautiful kind of reddish yellow blooms. Um, they typically will bloom in early spring and stay for around 6 weeks, depending on the temperatures. So the hotter it is, the quicker they're going to go bye-bye. Full sun to partial shade. Again, here we go. Make sure that if you want them to last a little bit longer, you're probably looking at like morning to early afternoon sun, not all day long. Prune after flowering to discourage reseeding, and you may end up with some leaf miners. We get those on a variety of plants. That's just basically a stage in the insect's life. There's all sorts of different insects that have that leaf miner stage, but it looks ugly. People don't like it and they want to know what you can do, and there's not much you can do short of just cutting off the leaf. I don't advise that. The plant, whether it be something like this or a tree, will drop the leaves if it is a problem. So don't worry about that too much. They're about 2 to 3 feet tall, about 1 to 1.5 feet wide. So kind of a nice middle of the flower garden kind of plant. All right, this is a favorite of mine, and it grows wild quite well if you've been driving, probably starting now, if you've been driving around and you've looked down maybe some power line right of ways or road right of ways along the road, kind of going out in semi-rural areas, you might see this brilliant splash of orange. And that's what this is. This is Asclepias species, Asclepias tuberosa, butterfly weed. It is very pretty. It's very hardy. It has a really nice hardy tuber on it. If you get permission, you can dig it up and you can bring it in, but I'm seeing it more and more available in nurseries. And it is a great pollinator plant. Not only do the butterflies like it, but you'll also get a lot of little bees on it, and it's a very showy bloomer, excuse me, for your garden. It will also spread quite nicely from the individual plant. So it will get up to be a larger and larger clump. It's hard to kind of germinate the seeds, but that's okay. I mean, you can always purchase the rootstock and grow it out that way. It will tolerate full sun and well-drained soil. So it's perfectly fine to have it in a very sunny location. And the pollinators love it. They absolutely love it. It can get some aphids just like any of the other milkweeds, and you can just kind of use a stream of water to kind of jet them off. It's pretty short. It doesn't get much more than about 2 feet, give or take, and about 1 to 2 feet wide. Although I have seen some clumps that have continued to grow. You should probably think about splitting it up. But again, dry open woods, you don't have to water it. Again, doesn't need much care, really. Fields and roadsides. Indigo. I have some of this in my garden. It does very well in a full sun. I don't have any in partial shade, but it does very well in full sun. It will grow, it will get big and bushy, and they'll have these little seed pods. It's very happy in a pollinator garden like that. Not a shade plant at all, but does very well once it's established. So it has these little pea-like blooms. It's a nitrogen fixer, and it tolerates pretty dry soil, which is great. I mean, I love that. Saw out at the Army Corps of Engineers native garden up on Lake Lanier. They had a native garden, and this stuff absolutely was killing it. It had been neglected for 4 or 5 years after COVID, and nobody did anything up there, took care of it. And these little plants, some of them in the native garden up there didn't do as well, but these little plants, they just grew their little hearts out. You can find these on riverbanks, gravel bars, open meadows, um, slightly moist to kind of dry soil. Mine's in, whatever Mother Nature provides, and it's perfectly happy and looks really great. So this is a good one. Green and gold. So a lot of people, um, I don't know, I've talked to both sides of the fence, I guess. Some of them are like, oh, they're really pretty little yellow flowers. I like these, and you know, I want to get more of this. And then some people are like, well, I don't like the vegetation. It looks like a weed. That's what a lot of natives are. Um, but it is a spring bloomer, and then you might get little sporadic yellow flowers through the rest of the summer and into the fall. It does prefer a little bit more shade. So if you have maybe a shadier spot along your trees, or maybe you have a bank along a stream, it would be, kind of a good option there. Maybe you're going for the woodland garden vibe. This is a good one to have in there. Large flowered coreopsis. There are a lot of different coreopsis species. There is like a Stone Mountain daisy. I really like that. I've got a power line right away in the back of my property, and it just grows there as long as it doesn't get cut down. I have to fuss at my neighbor. They always seem to cut it down right before it blooms. But beautiful little flower that attracts all sorts of little bees. If you're thinking about doing the pollinator census coming up here in August, the 21st and 22nd of August, same time every year, third Friday and Saturday in August, this is a great plant to have. And it will bloom from mid-June to October, all summer long in the heat of the Georgia summers. It doesn't care. And it tolerates very intense heat. It tolerates dry, weather if you don't want to maintain or do anything to it. Um, it prefers the full sun to the partial shade, and the well-drained soil, and it will do better for you, but it's pretty tolerant of really hot and dry conditions. So just like anything else, when it's frosty time, go ahead and cut it back, and it will appreciate that. Purple coneflower, not to be confused with some of the cultivars that are out there. There's some Cherokee varieties, the white ones, orangey ones, yellow, all of those. Those are not as hardy. I'm talking about the good old Echinacea purpurea. Okay, so this one is just the purple coneflower. It will readily reseed. It looks great. Pollinators love it. The butterflies love it. It does really well in full sun to very light shade, and it grows in a variety of habitats. You might get a little powdery mildew. You might get some aster yellows, which is a virus. If it starts looking really weird and getting these weird flower heads on there, that might be aster yellows. That's one of the things that we get calls on about from this particular flower. There's a lot of different types of flowers, but that is something that you can keep an eye out for. It'll clump about 2 to 4 feet tall. The plants will get nice and large. You'll get some reseeding. It's dry to slightly moist areas. The moister the area is, the more reseeding you're going to get. But it is a very tolerant pollinator plant and does really well here in Georgia. American boneset. So boneset, I love late boneset specifically, but this is a great nondescript pollinator plant. So it may pop up in the weedy areas in and around your yard, and you may miss it because it doesn't look like much, right? You can see a picture on the top left of what it looks like. It doesn't look like much, and then it'll put out a spray of white flowers, and you're like, oh, Where's And the bugs love it. It is a fantastic pollinator plant. Very easy for it to grow. I encourage folks to have some of this in the back part of your flower bed. It does get pretty tall, 3 to 5 feet. Um, but when those flowers are out there, it looks great, and the bugs love it. So I encourage you, if you've got some of this out there, to take a look. But so August to September-ish, late summertime is when you're going to be seeing this most often. And it is one of those flowers that, you know, some things you'll get a profusion of blooms early on in the season, and then as you move through, it'll a little less and a little less. August to September is when this blooms. So it's one of those vital natives that pops up in the garden and supplies a niche for insects when there aren't as many other flowers around. Grows best in moist soil, sunny to shady areas, partially shaded areas, and does well in clay, which we got an abundance of here, as well as sandy soil. So again, it does well all throughout the state here, sandy in the southern half, clay in the northern half. And you can just kind of clean it up just like you would after frost time. All right, wild geranium. So I see this in my yard. I just let it be. Crane's bill geranium. It's has these tiny little purple flowers, and it prefers to be trying to think of how to put it. It's very nondescript unless it's blooming, and your flowers are going to be here in the spring, as are quite a few of them, and you'll have these kind of lilac color, probably more so than pink, but the lilac color, pretty easy to grow. Like I said, it just kind of popped up in my yard, and I just let it be. I just let it do its thing. If you want the profusion of blooms, you got to make sure that it's getting some moisture in the spring, especially if it's not raining like it has been, and you can get it to repeat bloom, but you've got to do a little bit of deadheading on it. So again, most of these don't need much care, but if you want to encourage them to bloom more, you'll have to do a little bit of care. Rich, moist hardwoods, shaded roadsides, that kind of thing. Hepatica. Um, I have some of this in my um, shade garden, which is off on the side of the house on my think that's the western side, but I've got a lot of trees. So it gets a little bit of dappled sunlight, but it is very happy there. It'll have these kind of heart-shaped leaves with the three lobes. And March to April-ish, so kind of early spring, you'll get these little flower stalks and you'll see the purpley kind of violet looking flowers. And you can get the blues and lavenders, pinks or whites. There's some genetic variation, and depending on where the population is, you can get different colors. So this is a great woodland plant. So if you have some and you want to increase that, you can certainly do that. It's very low growing, only like 4 to 6 inches. So it'd be something you'd plant in the front. But this is a great woodland plant if you've got a nice shady wooded area that you would like something like this to grow in. Alum root, or coral bells, which is this is the native version. We have tons of heuchera cultivars that are out there. Um, Tons. Some very showy, some less showy, but this is your native version, the one that started it all, if you want to call that. There are some that do well in the south. There are some that do well in the north. My grandma grew it way up in northern Illinois. That wouldn't do very well here, but we do have some that does well down here, and that's the Heuchera americana. Um, haven't seen it really a lot in nurseries, mostly because there's so many other showy cultivars. But yes, this is one that will do fairly well here. Great in rock gardens, kind of woodland also. It prefers more organic matter, so you're probably talking less the power line right away and more the woodland garden near a stream or something like that. It'll grow 1 to 2.5 feet tall, give or take. The plant itself is fairly short growing, but the flower stalk can be quite tall. So that's your 2.5 foot tall with these pretty pinkish white flowers. And yeah, that's a good option. Little brown jug or wild ginger. I have some of this. I have not noticed any of the blooms. It's still spreading, but it is a very low growing, 3 to 6 inches tall, very small, but it grows really well in the front of a native bed. So, as I mentioned, I have some of this. It does spread readily. It's quite happy and it is really cute. It's a very cute plant. I go to the Gwinnett County Master Gardener plant sale every year. Uh, and I think I picked up 1 or 2 pots of this from somebody who was selling it there. And I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites. But it looks very good in a natural setting. I do have some of the wild variety. I believe I have a native but I do have some at my house up in Rabun County that just grows wild and it pops up around the house. It's perfectly happy. It moist or dry soils is not really particular. Very, very easy to grow and surprisingly shade tolerant. Spider lily. This is one that the Carolina spider lily. This one does prefer swampy, marshy, riverine, stream, rich, moist, inundated type situations. So if you have an area that you've been thinking about putting in maybe a rain garden, or maybe you have a natural seep or a spring, or just a low spot that holds a lot of water, this is a good option. It's basically a wetland plant. And if you go and do any searching, you can find really beautiful pictures where it's growing in the lower Chattahoochee River in the shoals. And it's very pretty, very pretty. And, but it does need to be in very moist conditions. I do need to qualify that. So, but it's very tolerant of sun to shade, um, as long as it gets its water. So keep that in mind. And it can get fairly tall, so 2.5 feet tall, give or take. So just make sure that if you have a wet spot for it, make sure that's where it is. Dwarf crested iris. So I have some of this in my yard, and it is very happy, very drought tolerant. And it does say to plant in the sun and partial shade. Mine is in dappled sunlight and it's in fairly dry conditions, dry woodland conditions. It will spread via rhizome and it kind of creeps along under the leaf litter. And it's very happy. It is very happy. I don't have much issue at all with it. In fact, I pull it out every spring because it just is very happy where it is. And I move it around a little bit, but mine's been established for quite a while. So I have plenty to share. I think I gave a native presentation a couple months ago and mentioned that I have some to share, and somebody actually drove to the office and picked up a big bag of it. So, but yeah, it's a very easy keeper, very tolerant of a wide range of conditions, very drought tolerant, and it's very pretty in the spring. Usually around Easter is when you can expect to see the blooms, and they look like this. Southern blue flag iris and or Virginia iris. So this one is like your typical iris, but the native variety. And you'll get flowers like this, so kind of nondescript. I mean, not as showy, obviously, as bearded, but you can use these along areas where it's wet. So if you have a stream, if you have a rain garden, if you have a pond, if you have an area along a river, these are a good marsh or wetland type plant to have along the edge there. We definitely don't recommend cutting grass or turf all the way down to the edge of any of those, pond, river, stream. You want that riparian area to be planted with something, right? That helps prevent any nutrients from flowing down turf and getting into the body of water with non-point source pollution. And these are a good option to have around there. They will use up some of the nutrients that do flow in. So this is a good option for that. Blazing star, this is Liatris or Liatris spicata. And You can get some native Rs of this. They come in different colors, whites and kind of a bluey pink. This one's the native, obviously, and it's a purpley color. Certain parts of the country, like up in the Northeast, it's actually invasive. They don't like it up there. But down here, we don't have the same conditions. So it does well here, but it is not an out of control grower. Um, Wanted to use that as an opportunity to educate in that it really is you have to look at the habitat of the plant. So some of these plants do very well in certain locations and they are great natives. They do wonderful in the landscape. And then you take that and you move it to a place and you tweak a few things and suddenly it might become invasive. That's what's happened here with a lot of things like kudzu, privet, all of those things that are in the top 10 list. And that's because we have a slight amount more of moisture, or maybe we have a slightly more temperate winter, or there's a lot of things that, can come into play there. So you have to kind of look at what the overall habitat is, the ecology of the area, because there might be subtle differences that we're not really thinking of, but that can make it invasive up in Pennsylvania, but not so much down here. And that's probably going to be, it's a little bit hotter. It's not as tolerant of that. And, you know, I'd have to delve into it a little bit more, but it's interesting. That's an interesting thing. So these can be fairly tall. So the plant itself, the basal part of the plant, the greenery is not very tall at all. But the flower spike is, and that can be 2 to 5 feet tall. So this is great for like wet mountain kind of, if you're looking for again, like a rock garden, maybe something like a rain garden, rock garden type situation, marshy areas, it'll do really well in that kind of situation. It does not mind wet feet. So that's a good option. And it's pretty happy with sun and it will bloom in June. So if it's not already blooming, it'll start blooming here shortly. Cardinal flower. Now, this is one of my favorites. I love this, and it does, again, very well along moist stream banks, ditches, lake shores, that kind of thing. You can go up to anywhere along the Chattahoochee and you can see it growing quite happily right along the river. So you'll get these beautiful little flower spikes that are red. So what's attracted to red? Hummingbirds. So this is a good one if you have a rock garden that you maybe want to try to train it into, or I guess create a rain garden. This would be a good option for having that flower, and it'll bring in some hummingbirds. So flowering will start in August and lasts about a monthish, somewhere in there. But yeah, just reading, it says, does not like wet sites. And then below, habitat, moist areas, stream banks, and ditches. I did not write this. Yes, it does like wet sites, but you can grow it a little bit more upland as well. So I'll have to go in there and check that. I guess somebody missed that when they were editing, but it can do just fine along wet areas. Great blue lobelia. So lobelia is another one that the nursery industry has kind of taken and run with. And there are lots of native Rs floating around out there, but this is the original, if you will, the OG. So it's going to have, a nice fleshy green flower stalk, and then you'll get the flowers the purpley flowers that will pop all along those stems. And so it's going to grow in really rich areas. So think, wetland, somewhere along a stream bank, woodland areas. It prefers wetter areas. So, and it prefers not having them be dry all the time. So if you are near a river or stream bank, this would be a good option if it's close to a water source. And it can grow pretty tall, up to 3 feet tall with those flower spikes. So it's something that would be best served in the back of your flower bed. Bee balm. This is one that I love, and I don't have enough sun right now, which is sad. It does prefer very sunny conditions. Um, But bee balm is an easy keeper. You don't have to do. In fact, it does not like fertilization. It will die back if you fertilize it. So, but hummingbirds love this, and butterflies love this. The bees love this. It does have very tubular shaped flowers. So you will see probably more hummingbirds and more butterflies because their feeding apparatus matches what you see here. And I've done lots of programs on that where we talk about how flowers evolved to along with certain insects or other pollinators, and they service those particular pollinators because of the shape of the flower or the nectar guides. And in this case, because they're tubular, you're going to get butterflies and you're going to get hummingbirds mostly. Um, so you can get different colors. Mostly it's going to be red or pink or something like that. Um, Again, a lot of those are nativars, meaning they've been enhanced. But Monarda didyma is typically going to be more of a violet-ish color. 3 to 5 feet tall, so the red nativar is a little bit taller, probably closer to the 5 feet, and it will creep along and grow along and fill the bed out as long as it's happy. Hmm. It does like water. So if you don't have a lot of water, it will typically not grow and fill the area out unless you enhance that and water it. Bergamot. So obviously it looks exactly like the bee balm, and you would be right in knowing it's the same family. So it's a Monarda. And this one is kind of that violet color. So, um, very pretty, 2 to 4 feet tall. This one's a little more tolerant of drier conditions. So you can look at that as an option if you don't have the moist area. It can get some powdery mildew, so too can the bee balm, but it's slightly different color, slightly different growing conditions, but just equally as pretty. Horse mint, in the mint families, we have we have a lot of different types of mountain mint, horse mint, spotted horse mint, kind of nondescript. A lot of them are, but the pollinators love them. So 1 to 3 feet tall, it will spread and will fill an area in. So beware of that, especially if it is in a place that it likes. That does not mean it's invasive. That just means that it's happy. And that means you can share some with your neighbor if it's happy. And again, another teaching moment, just because it spreads and is happy in a particular location, so too it may not be happy in anything other than those very specific circumstances. So it's important to know that just because you may get some that pops up a little further outside of the bed that you're growing it in doesn't mean it's invasive. It simply means that it really likes where it is. But you put it on the other side of your house and it might be very unhappy and it dies. It's very specific in its site characteristics. So just, keep an eye on that. They're natives, they're good. Some of them are a little more vigorous in their growth, some of them less, but they're very tolerant of the conditions here. Beer's tongue. So again, another nondescript kind of basil, green, leafy plant, but it sends up these flower stalks that have these kind of orchid-like flowers on them that are very pretty. Tubular flowers, so for butterflies and that kind of thing. So white, May to July, early summer-ish, I would say. So it's a easy keeper. Open woodland areas, kind of disturbed areas, you'll find pretty tolerant. But you want to make sure that you're not putting them too close together. As with the Monardas and some of the others, you can get powdery mildew. You want to minimize that by not clumping them too close together because there's no air circulation in there. So always stick with the label directions when you're planting. Summer phlox. I had this a lot when my yard was much more open and had some sun. The canopy is pretty closed now, so I can't grow a lot in my yard anymore. But I used to have this, and it was absolutely beautiful. It did great. Phlox paniculata, and pretty easy to source is a nativar in nursery situations. You can find whites and purples and pinks like this. And you can look for the true native variety. So it prefers kind of a moist, loamy soil, so good garden soil if you want to think of it that way. And it's pretty tolerant of sun to partial shade. My experience is you need to have a little more sun. It's not super tolerant of the shade situation. So you could probably put it in the afternoon, so like noon to 5 or 6, and it would be perfectly happy. Good soil or good air circulation, and that heat can also help burn off any water and help with um, air circulation around there. Creeping phlox. Um, so creeping phlox is kind of a lower growing variety than what you were just looking at, garden phlox. And it's kind of semi-evergreen. Some people will use this as a lawn, kind of a lawn alternative. If you have an area that doesn't grow turf very well, maybe around a flower bed, maybe you want to not have to cut right up to the flower bed, so you have a transition area. This is good for that. It's great in a moist woodland area, and it prefers a partial shade. Dappled sunlight would be, I guess, kind of what I would think about calling that. And it's spreading, so it's very low growing and spreading. It's not aggressive, so it's not going to take over your yard or anything like that. But it's an option if you're looking for different textures along a walking trail or something like that. And it does prefer those richer woodland type garden areas. Moss phlox. So every spring, when you're driving around out in the rural areas, you'll almost always see when you see a house, older house back there, and maybe there's a bank up against the road, you'll see some of this stuff growing there. And Grandma used to grow it, but it'll form a mat, kind of matted greenery, and then you'll get these profusion of pretty fuchsia flowers in the spring. So late March to early April, and very pretty. You can get different color variations, pinks and kind of purplies and whites and things like that. But the pink is the phlox subulata is the native version. It's pretty tolerant of really hot and dry conditions. So if you've got some rock outcrops or something like that, you can plant this around there and it can adapt pretty good. It's very kind of low growing, 6 to 10 inches tall. I think that's even generous. I'd probably give it more like a 4 inch. But it's you'll find it up in the mountains as well. But I had some for a while, but I ran out of sunlight. So sadly, it's not around anymore. This is another favorite of mine, Solomon seal. Now you can buy the native variegated variety, and that gets sold a lot at garden centers. I have this all over my property. It's very tolerant of shade, and it's very showy. The native variety, I also have some of this. It is kind of nondescript, but obviously looks pretty similar to its cousin. And I have some that's popped up on my property here in Walton County. I also have some that's popped up in my property up in Rabun County. Um, it does require shade, which is why I have so much of it, because I have no sun left to do anything with. And it prefers constant moisture, but once established, it's more tolerant to drier shade. So you just have to be patient with it if you're trying to get it to establish in a drier area. But if you have an area that does get abundant moisture, it will spread readily. Very pretty. It'll form nice big clumps. You can share, that kind of thing. And it's seen typically like in the mountainous areas and hardwood forest, that kind of stuff. Black-eyed Susan. This is a popular one. Rudbeckia, we sell this at our plant sale in the spring. Prefers full sun. It's very tolerant of, once it's established, of areas that are pretty sunny and dry. You don't have to do a whole lot with it. If it's a little humider or has poor circulation, you might see some leaf spot disease, but it's nothing of real concern. And you can get it to continue to bloom by deadheading it. It's about 3 feet tall with the flower spikes, so it makes for a great mid flower bed kind of location, flower in location. And you'll find them in like open fields and prairies and the DOT wildflower mix. You might see some in there, that kind of thing. Goldenrod, I know some people are like, no, my allergies. There's a lot of goldenrods out there that provide a lot of good benefits in the late summer. Ragweed is actually what you want to demonize. And nobody likes ragweed. It looks very similar. I have this stuff popping up down in my garden all the time. It does spread very readily through runners, and it's a little frustrating when I want other things to grow there, and this keeps popping up, but I always leave a few because the pollinators really like it in the late summer. Um, but ragweed is the one that you want to demonize, and it can get pretty tall, upwards of 6 feet tall. So this is something that you'll find, you know, all over the place. Meadows, that's a power line right away. I have a lot of it. Old cultivated fields, and it, again, late summer, and you'll see the yellow flowers, and the pollinators love it. The New England aster. So this is fairly, um, it has a bit of a weedy growth. I guess I will say it can get pretty tall, 6 to 8 feet tall. And you'll get this profusion of purple flowers. Some people are probably thinking of the shorter variety that is very low mounded and growing. It looks very similar to this aster, but this is a taller one, and it can get much bigger. So this is something you'd want to put in the back of your flower bed because it's so tall. Um, it prefers moisture areas, so it's something that you either have to put it in a moisture area or you're going to have to water it a little bit. Um, Full sun to part shade, it's pretty tolerant of light conditions, and you can pinch it back to get it to encourage a shorter growth. So it's pretty spindly if you don't do anything to it, but as with everything else, you can pinch it back and get it to be a little bushier. Trilliums. So we sold a few of these at our plant sale as well. I don't think I have any of these at my house. I purchased some and I planted them, and I don't think they came back. Um, these do get rescued periodically from home sites, and then Georgia Native Plant Society will have plant sales, and so you can buy them. But they're a really pretty mountain wildflower, mountain Piedmont kind of wildflower. So you'll see them from February to early April. So sometimes before the woods even wake up, you'll see these guys poking their little heads out of the soil, and it's kind of a harbinger of spring. So 6 to 12 inches tall, about the same time that you would see like May apples popping up. You will see these guys. Moist, shaded, forest, bottomlands, that kind of thing. I typically think of them like wooded mountain areas. All right, native grasses. Let's finish it up here. So, bushy blue stem. This is one that you'll see it it'll get kind of bronzy in the fall winter time. So it can be quite attractive. It just looks like a grass in the summertime, but it does have, I think we called it buffalo grass when I was growing up. And it's very tolerant of full sun and pretty tolerant of kind of dryish to moist soils. So it's a good option for disturbed areas like the power line right of way. And you can cut those clumps back and they'll come back, be perfectly happy. A lot of this up at that Army Corps of Engineers native garden, it just kind of moved in on its own and it was quite happy. So we moved some around to give it more of a cultivated look, like there were paths and things in there. But yeah, very easy to establish. And once it's there, it's perfectly happy. Bunch grass. Little blue stem or bunch grass. I have this stuff that pops up in my power line right of way, and it's kind of if you're looking for a mounded type plant, a clumping plant, this is a good option for that. It prefers really hot sun, but can tolerate a little bit of shade. Will be happier in areas where it gets a little bit of moisture, but is tolerant of poor soils too. So if you've got a hillside that just lots of clay, lots of sun, don't quite know what to do with it, you can think about doing something like this if you can find it. Doesn't like wet sites, so not a rain garden plant, but is really tolerant of clay soils. Purple love grass. So I see this for sale occasionally with natives, and so it's full, partial sun, well-drained soil, that kind of thing, but it tolerates really poor soils, which is why you'll see it, excuse me, along um, in power line right of ways and along road cuts and things like that. About 2 feet tall, about a foot wide, kind of clumpy-ish, but can go into disturbed areas. So you do have to kind of watch if you've got it growing in a garden and make sure it doesn't get too vigorous. But it does have these really interesting kind of reddish purple panicles like you see there, the seed heads. Pink muhly grass, one of my favorites, and probably one of the best known grasses, native grasses. You can get the white variety or you can get the pink. Clumping, 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, very pretty, puts out these feathery fern-like pink, uh, you know, uh, I'm blanking out here. Um, okay, well, you know what I'm saying. I'm in vacation mode. But you'll get these pinkish flowers that are going to be forming like that. And then um, I'll see in some commercial areas, they'll actually have mass plantings of these. It's great for erosion. It prefers full sun, but will tolerate some shade. Very tolerant of all soil moistures, conditions, and it does prefer a more well-drained soil, but it can be tolerant of poor soils as well. So it's a good option for commercial mass plantings or even in your house if you're looking for something to, edge a sidewalk or a back part of a planting bed or something like that. And these are readily sold. I see them, I've even seen them at big box stores. So pretty easy to find. Okay, so that's basically the species list. And then, so let's talk about natural mulch and ground covers. So I personally like using like chip drop or something like that because I can get that for free and it lasts longer. So it'll take a while for it to break down. I don't have to keep adding to it. But you can certainly also use your leaves. So I know some people will rake it all up and then they buy the bags at the big box stores and put them out there on their curb and they get hauled away. Well, you're getting rid of all the good stuff. Not only does that help promote fireflies and other beetles, so if you're sitting there staring outside wondering where all the fireflies went, you got rid of it. If you can, use those leaves as a mulch. So they will break down very quickly, but that's where those insects overwinter. So we encourage folks to not get rid of your leaves when they fall, and actually, blow them into the corner of the yard or under the trees, or use them as mulch in and around the back. It'll retain that soil moisture the same way the pine bark nuggets will as it breaks down, as the decomposers work on it, that will improve the soil structure and it will help with the nutrition of the plants. And plus, if you have any kind of a hillside or anything, it'll help reduce erosion. Establishing strong roots. We've already talked about that. Um, Establishing plants, but instead of, some people will go out and they will water for 15 minutes and just sprinkle things. Don't do that. You're much better off watering deeply once a week for an hour than you are going out 2 or 3 times that week and sprinkling for 15 minutes. Water deeply and infrequently. And that is a rule for just about every single plant. That can be turf, that can be flowers, that can be trees, bushes, whatever. But only if there hasn't been rainfall in 7 to 10 days. So that's about every week. So like for instance, a tree with like a 3-inch caliper, you know, basically caliper meaning width, needs about 10 gallons of water a week. And so if you get, an inch and a half or 2 inches of rain, you're probably fine. But if you haven't, you need to water. We've had quite a few that have come in and their trees are starting to die before we just got this rain. And that's because they weren't watering. And you've got to water. You got to make sure your plants get what they need. Right plant, right place. I've mentioned that several times. And I've also tried to share with you where you should plant that in your planting bed. So if you have something very tall, you want to put that in the back, something medium, put that in the middle, something very short and low growing, put that in the front. Note the sun needs, the sun intensity needs, full sun, full shade. Note the soil moisture levels, dry, moist, or wet. And is it a pollinator plant? Is it a host plant? If you don't know what a host plant is, that's basically where butterflies have to lay their eggs because their babies need to feed off of that particular type of plant. Certain butterflies may have, a singular host plant, or they may have a suite of plants that they can utilize for food for their babies. Um, some attractive to bees, as I've mentioned before. Some plants attract bees more than butterflies or anything else. Some more butterflies or hummingbirds. Excuse me, it's based on the shape of the flower. It's based on the nectar guide, which is a UV how the flower appears under UV light. So some flowers might look yellow to your eyes and mine, but if you were to put them in the dark and hold a UV light over them, there would be interesting patterns. And those are called nectar guides because insects don't always see the same way we do. They see through UV radiation, UV light, the wavelengths from UV. So things are like that are very interesting, and different plants attract different insects. So if you choose to do the pollinator census, that's something that you can learn a little bit about. And then again, sun, select plants for 8B, 8A or B or 7B. And if you're up in the mountains, you may want to go a little bit less, 7 or 6, and then down by the coast, 9s. So just be aware of what plant you have and what it needs. And then the certification checklists. So again, making sure that your plants are adapted to your particular climate and especially microclimate, and the pests that you have to deal with. Put the plant in the right place, all the things that we just talked about. Using natural mulch and ground covers. If you cannot do pine straw or wheat straw or whatever, more man-made stuff, opt for the free stuff. Use what nature gave you. Establish those roots strong. Make sure you're establishing your plants in that first year and a half. It's very important. The root systems will grow much deeper. They'll be more resilient. And then when it rains or when it doesn't rain, you're not going to care because your plants will be happy. And that's basically it. So you can check out the Georgia Green Landscape program at this QR code or at the website that you see there. There's what the sign looks like. Basically like that. It's about that size. And then that's basically it. That's me. This is being recorded. So it will go up on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel here shortly. Well, a couple weeks probably. I'll be out on vacation. And it'll go up there with, I believe there's probably 6 or 7 of the videos that are up there. If you want a copy of the slides, I'm happy to share. You can send me an email and I'll send you a PDF of that. And if you want to watch other recordings, I've got a ton of stuff there. There's probably like over 100 videos now of all sorts of different subject matter. And it's all great for Master Gardener credit or just learning stuff. There's also maybe you go to trivia and you need all sorts of interesting tidbits. All right, let's see if there's any questions. How to get rid of blankety blank squirrels. That's a good one. So squirrels are very pesky and if they've found something like your bird feeder or something else, They're difficult to get rid of. You basically have to find a device that excludes them from whatever it is that you're trying to keep them away from. Now, that could be a bird feeder, that could be your tomato plants. There's all sorts of things. It really depends on what you're trying to keep them away from. I saw a really cute idea that just used an empty 2-liter bottle with the bottom cut off of it. And then they took the pole that the bird feeder was on, they put something around the middle part to prevent the bottle from going all the way down. But the squirrel started climbing up and it climbed up into the middle of the 2-liter and then it climbed all the way up. But because it was such a narrow area, it couldn't get out and around to get to the bird feeder. And it was too far away for it to jump to get to the bird feeder. It was so funny. And it was almost free because it was just a recycled 2-liter. So something like that is a good option. We really look at ways to be wily and outsmart them so that they can't get whatever it is that you want. So for instance, if it's like I don't have a problem out in my power line right of way because it's a big open area and I have hawks, birds of prey that sit there and watch. So I rarely get any issues with squirrels out there because they know the hawks are there and that's a possibility of getting eaten. So I don't have that much problem. So predation, but you can harass them. So if you have dogs, that's a good one. Sometimes people will set up motion detection sprinklers and around the base of the garden. So if you have a big open area, you can set up the motion detective sprinklers. It works good for deer too. Although deer are a little more tolerant, but the little animals don't like getting blasted in the face either. So you have to come up with some options to exclude the animals from whatever it is or harass them to get them to move on. Those are typically the two ways that we try to figure that out. So we just had a lot of rain. When should be a good time to start watering new plants again? Now. Um, so we've had some dry spells. We might have a little rain this weekend, but remember, we're still running on a big deficit from what we had before. I mean, we were in the hole like 14 to 16 inches. So even if you got 6 inches, you're still in the hole. A lot of that happened very fast and it ran off. It didn't actually sink in. We need a lot of 2 to 5 inch rainfalls over the course of the summer, nicely spaced, to really make up that deficit. Our water, our soil moisture, and you can go check that out. You can go, it's UGA weather.com. If you type in UGA weather, it'll pop up, but it'll show you soil moisture at different levels, like 2 inches, 4 inches, that kind of thing. So you can see in real time what the soil moisture actually looks like. But I would water now, especially if it's not an established plant. It's been dry enough. I was out picking some blueberries yesterday evening, and even though they were nice and plump over the weekend, they don't feel as plump as they were over the weekend. So I'm probably going to have to irrigate. Um, just gouging around plants. Yeah, squirrels. Yeah, they're looking for nuts and things that they've buried. So real difficult to do anything about that. If they're not doing anything to your plants, probably better to just kind of leave them be. How do you get rid of chipmunks? Again, chipmunks they've got to have some place that they can go live nearby. That's going to be stone walls. That's going to be brush piles or tall grasses, um, things like that. Some place that they can hide, which also consequently is where snakes like to hide, but places where they can hide. They don't typically, I guess they would if you had some hollow areas underneath a patio or a driveway or something like that. They don't typically like to live right next to where people are, but they will if it's a good habitat. So eliminating those places. So if you have a pile of stones that you've been saving because you're going to put a patio in, move those away. Put your patio in because they're probably living in and amongst those cracks. Um, If you have some tall grass, if you have some pile of branches in the back, they're probably living there. And if you eliminate the habitat, they will move on. Not to say that they don't just, skitter around and they may live in a hollow area under one of your trees or something like that. But yeah, you basically eliminate the habitat, eliminate the bird feeders because they come over and get all the seeds that are on the ground. That's where they are. And as long as you have a place for them to live and something for them to eat, they will be there. All right, let's see. Oh, thank you. I hope I will have a good vacation also. So, any other questions before I sign off? All right. Well, if that's it, then I will go ahead and sign off. And I hope everybody has a good evening and good dinner if you haven't already eaten. But yes, I will be back, I believe, towards the end of June with another webinar, and then we'll pick up again moving forward through the rest of the summer. So thank you all for attending. I appreciate you being here, and you're always welcome to email if you have questions about, anything natural resources. We're always here for you at Extension, and we appreciate you taking the time to sign in. So take care.